Hey Defenders, welcome back. In this video, I want to show you guys how we can use Shuffle to automate our phishing analysis. So before we do jump into it, there are going to be a few requirements that are necessary for this workflow. So I'm going to take advantage of my Office 365 email account. And then of course we have our tools. So Shuffle, again, going to be the brains behind what we use to build our workflow. The Hive to store our alerts and ultimately create a case out of our phishing email that we received. And then Cortex to do some analysis on that. And so the procedure for this demo, we'll first configure our email inbox within Shuffle so that we can take advantage of O365's API to be able to grab unread emails. We're then going to strip out the email contents, and then we're going to pass that data to the Hive so that the Hive will be our storage place of where we can see emails that we receive from users who suspected a phishing attempt. And this will be kind of the workflow and what it'll look like when everything is said and done. But enough of that, let's go ahead and jump into it. And alright, so I'm on my Shuffle instance here. Let's go ahead and create a new workflow. I'm just going to say phishing emails. And the first node that we'll need to add to our workflow here is actually going to be to receive the email, right? So here within my email inbox, I went ahead and sent myself just a goofy little test email here. This, of course, isn't any sophisticated type of phishing attack, but I've included a domain here and then an actual URL so we can actually see that being stripped out, and then we can analyze that with Cortex. So let's actually go ahead and set that up. So here within our active apps, if we search for OWA, you'll see our Outlook OWA. And this will allow us to actually ingest emails that we received in our inbox. So we're going to go ahead and set up an authentication for it. And I'll just say demo auth. I'm then going to give my username, and that pertains to your Office 365 account, which is usually your email address. So I'm going to say info@opensecure.co. I'm going to give my password. I'm then going to provide the server, and this will just be the default that we're going to use. So I'll say outlook.office365.com. We're going to use a build of 15.1, and then we're going to verify our account again. It'll be info@opensecure.co, and then I'm going to go ahead and submit that and save that off. So now our authentication is using our demo auth here, and let's first do an action of get email. So let's go ahead and get our email. You see, it's then asking us for a folder name. Here, I just have my generic inbox that I'm going to use. If you had like subfolders under your inbox, so maybe you had like inbox/phishing, right? So if you had like a subfolder under your inbox that is phishing, that internal users forward their phishing alerts to you, and you receive them within that folder, you can just specify your path with just a slash. So it'll be your parent folder and then whatever subfolders are under it. But here I'm just using my generic inbox. We're going to use we can then set an amount to the amount of emails that we want to retrieve. In this demo, I'm just going to retrieve one. You could, retrieve more and then pass that off to a subflow and do kind of a bundle analysis if you're receiving a lot of emails from users. But I like to just leave it at one for simplicity, and then we can set a trigger to this guy to have it run every so often. And I'll show you guys that here in a sec. We can set unread to true or false. Since my email that I recently sent to myself is still unread, so if I click off of it, it's still unread. I'm going to set that to true so that when this API call is made, it only retrieves any unread emails. And since I have it set to 1, it'll grab the first one that is unread. So I'll set that unread to true. Category, we can leave blank. None of these fields are required. I am going to make sure that I include the raw body of the message. So when this runs, I'll get the body of my email message. So I want to make sure that that is set to true. Then I'm going to also upload the email to Shuffle, and I'll kind of show you guys how that's working here in a sec. So this will actually upload the .msg file to Shuffle to where we could grab it and do some more analysis on it if we wanted to as well, which is a really nice feature to add. And then I'm not doing attachments in this demo. I'm going to actually tackle attachments in the next video, so y'all make sure y'all stick around for that. But this looks good, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. And let's go ahead and test this guy and make sure that our authentication is working and that it's actually getting my email. All right, so we got a success back, so everything's looking good. And all right, this is looking good. So let's kind of walk through it. So there's a Microsoft, and what's actually pretty nice, Microsoft sends back a ton of data, right? So we're seeing a ton of stuff here that pertains to the email, and not only the email, the sender, the destination, where it was received by, so the mail servers that received it. So we're seeing we're getting a lot of metadata back, which is really nice. And here you can actually see that Microsoft is actually identifying the URIs and domains in the body of the email, which is nice. I'm not having to do anything sophisticated to do that. It's actually picking up, Microsoft is detecting, hey, that's a URL, and then, hey, we see that this is a domain, and it's stripping that out for us already. So now we can take this data and pass it to the Hive and pass it to Cortex and now do some analysis on that, right? Because this, you know, someone's telling me, hey, check out this awesome website and is linked to it, but I want to get some more intelligence around this URL before I actually visit it. So let's continue to build this guy out. But here we're seeing all the data that we're getting back from Microsoft, which is really awesome. And so let's go ahead then and then create an alert within the Hive for that, so telling us, hey, we got a phishing email. So I'm going to call this guy just create alert. I already set up my credentials for the Hive. Authentication, check out my previous video if you need some assistance on that. And let's go ahead and give it a type. I'll just say phishing email, and these can pretty much be whatever you want. I'm going to say phishing inbox for my source, and we'll see where these values actually come into play here in a sec. And then I'm going to do my source reference, and here I like to bring in the email ID. So if we go back to what Microsoft sent back to us, you see we get this email file ID field back. So I'm going to set my source ref to this incident, to this email ID. So I'm going to go ahead and select this guy, and I'll say incident, I'll say dash. And if I scroll down to the bottom here to autocomplete, you'll see our email file ID, and you'll see the value that's associated with it there on the left. So I'll go ahead and select that. Title, I'll just say fish alert, and I'll leave the description and stuff blank for now. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's go ahead and test that out, make sure that that is still in red. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and test this out and make sure that we can initially create the alert in the Hive. I always like to run executions after I add a node just to make sure that is working correctly before I proceed to adding the next node. So we get a success back. We're getting details back from the Hive, so that looks good. And then if I come into alerts here, you'll see our fish alert just came in. And here you can see the type that we set to phishing email, the source we set to phishing inbox, and then here you can see our source reference that we specify incident dash and then the email ID that Microsoft sent back to us. And all right, let's go ahead and now update this case with a little more information here. So I'm going to add another Hive node, and I will go ahead and connect these two guys. And I'll just call this guy update alert. And I'm going to scroll to the update field. My field type is an alert. The ID that we want to change, right, will be the value from our create alert. So I'm going to grab the value of the create alert ID here so that when this update alert runs, it knows what alert ID to actually add this update to. I'm then going to say a field of description because I want to actually edit the description of the alert. And then for the description, I'm actually going to include some of the details from our email, right? And I'm going to include this in the GitHub that I'll link to in the description below, so that you guys can just copy and follow this along. So let's go ahead and actually see what we're doing here. So if I parse this guy, if I put these two on the side here, so let's first grab the sender. Well, we get the sender from our header.from field. So we can kind of build this out so that our analysts can actually kind of view this email within the Hive. So if we scroll down to our header, and then there should be a from. So if we scroll down to our header and then find our from field, and I just sent this to myself, so I use my info at opensecure.co, so I'm actually the sender as well. So I'm going to say, okay, let's grab that value and add it to sender here. Let's then grab the to, let's go ahead and set to, and we're going to say header.to, and that will be this value here. So I'm sending it to info at opensecure.co. Let's go ahead and grab the date, which is right down here. So we're saying header.date. Let's grab that. We're going to just set that to date. And these are static text, right? So where you don't see a $sign, that's all static. So you could configure this to be whatever you wanted. We're then going to grab the sender IP address, which is our received IP field. So it's actually using IPv6 for this, but that's fine. There's no worries for that. So we're grabbing that. I'm going to go ahead and grab that. And then let's also grab the sender domain, which would be our receive from domain. So we're grabbing the mail servers that were handling this email before it ultimately got routed to my inbox. And then we're going to set the content to the body.content. So if we scroll back up here, you'll see our body, and then you scroll down, you see content, and here you actually see the content of the email, right? So I said, hey, OpenSecure, check out this awesome website, gave the URL there, and then don't forget to check me out at hacker.com. So we're actually seeing the content of the email, which is really cool. And then let's also grab our body.domain so we can see domains that have been stripped out of the email. So we can just quickly eyeball, hey, what is, if these domains look suspicious or not. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all this here. And then I'm going to paste it within the description of my update alert here. So I'm going to remove that. And then for my data, I'm just going to paste what exactly was in the notepad so that it's all there. So let's go ahead and save that. I'm going to remove this previous alert because it'll gripe at me because it's going to use the same reference ID. So it'll gripe at me and say that that's already been created. So just to avoid that, let's go ahead and run this. Now we should see an alert be created again, and then we should also see our description be added to the alert. So if we come back, we see alerts been created. Let's go ahead and preview this guy. And here you can actually see the description, right, which is pretty sweet. So we see our sender was OpenSecure. We see to, it was to OpenSecure. We see the date, the sender IP, sender domain, and then we get the contents of the email as well. It doesn't do any escaping on its own, so it's not as pretty as it could be. But you could probably build some logic in to actually escape this out while sending it to the Hive. I won't get into that in this example, but you kind of get the gist of what's happening. Now our analysts can just go into the Hive and actually see the contents of the email, and then we see the domains that have been stripped out of the body contents of the email. So I'll go ahead and cancel that guy, and let's continue to add some nodes. So now let's add some observables to our alert, right? So I'll go ahead and build out the Hive again. We're going to add observables of the body domains and body URIs that have been stripped out via Outlook. Create a node here, and I'll say add body URLs. And I'm going to add an alert artifact here. And my alert ID will be, if I autocomplete here, I'll go to my create alert and grab my ID field. My type here, since this is going to be a URL, I'll say a data type of URL. And then let's grab our URL list, right? So if we go back to what our alert looked like, this is actually a list of 2 items that are within this URI field. So to do list, we're actually going to add a hashtag at the end of our assignment, right? So at the end of our variable assignment here. So I'll go ahead and erase that, and let's autocomplete, and let's grab the body contents URI dot list. So it says undefined here because it's not there, because it's a list within that, right? So I'll go ahead and select that, and then you'll see that the hashtag symbol has been added to the end, right? So that's telling Shuffle, hey, this is a list, so I want you to loop through this list until you are complete. And then for the message here, I'll just say URL, and go ahead and erase that for now and save that. And let me delete this alert, and let's rerun this, and we should see now observables being added to our alert. So now that that's finished, let's go ahead and jump into this. And here, if we scroll down, we do see our 2 observables, right? So our URL being added here, right? It added it twice, but one has a slash and the other one doesn't. It must be like a reference link or something that I did when I just copy and pasted that over. So that's no biggie, but that's looking good. So let's go ahead now and add our domains. So I'm going to add another Hive node here, and I'm just going to pass it to this guy along. I'm going to simultaneously say, hey, when update alert is finished, let's run both of these guys here. I'll say add body domain, and here I'm going to add an alert artifact again, and then set my alert ID. My data type here will be domain, and then we're going to grab, instead of the listed URIs, we're going to grab the listed body domains, which should be this guy here. So yeah, we see body domain. We're going to grab that guy, since that guy will be a list as well. So go ahead and save that. For my message here, actually, let me say domain, and I'll go ahead and erase that, and then save that, and delete this, and let's run that. So now our URLs that have been stripped out and the domain that's been stripped out, which should be that hacker.com, should be added as observables now to our alert. So our alert's been created. Let's go ahead and look into it. And sure enough, we see our domains now. So hacker.com, and then it's stripping out this domain, right? Because it is the domain of this URL here. And is adding those 2 for us. So great, that's starting to look good. Now let's actually create a case out of this alert so we can run our analyzers against the domains and URLs that have been stripped out. So go ahead and cancel that. I'll go ahead and preemptively delete that and go back here, and I'm actually going to use just a curl to actually create my case, because there is a create a case from alert option within the Hive. For some reason, it's not working with my current instance. I have other instances where this is working. So instead of really either rebuilding everything or spending time troubleshooting, I'm just going to use a curl because that will achieve the same result for me. So select this guy. I'll select curl, and here I'm going to plug in my curl statement that I'll use to create to create a case out of an alert. So I'm using a post. I'm setting my authorization headers here. This is my API key. This is just my demo environment, so I'm not too worried about exposing it to you guys. And then posting it to the Hive, and then I'm saying this is the alert ID. So we're specifying that variable, right? So you can see the $ here. You can say, hey, we're going to grab the value from create_alert .hashtag.id, right, which will be the alert ID that we need to grab. And then ultimately we're going to then create a case, and then we're saying to create a case out of it. So we'll go ahead and copy this guy, and then just paste that there and save that, and don't have an alert. So let's go ahead and run this, and now we should get full execution to where now a case is also created. So that's finished. We got a success back. So if we go back to our cases, now we see, hey, we have a fish alert, we see the contents of the email, right? We see the domains that have been stripped out. And if we go to our observables, we now have some observables that we can run an analysis against. So let's go ahead and do that. So, and if you want to automate this, I touched on that in the last video. I won't go through automating running the analyzers just because that'll make this video longer. And I've already reflected on that in the last video, which I'll link in the description below. So you guys can go ahead and check that out if you want to see how you can automatically run these analyzers. But let me go ahead and select all. So I'm using virus total. Then I'm also using URL scan, which is a cool little website, and we should get a little link to it. And it's free. You just have to enable it within Cortex. So you guys probably won't have these here by default unless you have enabled them via Cortex. So make sure you enable them there as analyzers, or else you won't see them as options within the Hive here. So I'll go ahead and run selected analyzers. And now the Hive is reaching out to Cortex and saying, hey, let me get the analysis back on these domains and URLs here. So header.com, of course, has some hits. And let's go ahead and check these guys out. So here is URL scan responding back to us, and they actually hyperlink as part of the analyzer report, which is nice. So I can open this guy in a new tab, and you actually kind of get a live, you get a most recent screenshot of what the page looked like when URL scan ran, and then we can see some more metadata around that, right? But now our analysts can now quickly see if an email is malicious, and can actually see now the contents of that email. And I also mentioned, right, saving the file as in MSG. So if we actually go into our admin panel here and go into files, you see our files have been grabbed from our most recent runs. So we can actually download now this email.msg file, and you can actually open it up within Outlook, or if you're using some other email analysis tool, right? So if I go into my downloads, and I'll just open this in Notepad++ because I don't feel like waiting for Outlook to start up, and you can actually see the contents of the email, right? And this is kind of similar. This would look much prettier in Outlook since this is just in Notepad, but you're seeing all the details of the email here. So you can actually, extract that from Shuffle if you wanted to. There's a lot of cool things you can do with files, especially when we start to touch on attachments in the next video. And Shuffle can actually store files, and you can quickly bring these files into your workflows, which is really powerful, but we'll touch on that later. So let me go ahead and actually go back into my workflow here, and all this is looking good. And now let's actually, as our last piece of this video, let's actually have a job that actually reads this email. Because right now, like our workflow is going, but the email is still read, right? I don't want to have to manually click into here every time one of this workflows runs, because now every time it runs, it'll just get the first unread email, which is this guy, and we've already analyzed this. So at the end of my workflow here, let's just add another Outlook node here, and then I will go ahead and connect this guy to have it to mark email as read at the end of this workflow. So now our unread email will be moved to read, so then that way whenever our Outlook API runs again to get the latest unread emails, right, this one will now not be grabbed because we've already analyzed it. So we can actually automate that, which is really nice. So we'll go ahead and select the action of mark email as read, and here it's asking for an email ID, which will actually be the message ID. So if we autocomplete here, and then scroll down, you'll see our email file ID, but we want the message ID. So we're going to head and set it to that guy. So now we're going to make the API call out to Outlook and say, hey, I want you to read this email, right? And the folder name isn't required, so we can skip over that for now. We'll go ahead and save and then rerun this guy. And now when this ends, we should see that this automatically will be moved to a read state, which will be nice. So we're now creating our alert and going through all of our Hive workflow and creating our alert here, creating our case within the Hive, right? Getting all of our contents. And now if we scroll down, we got a success back. So that looks good. Okay, Outlook gave us a response of true. So now if we go back in our inbox, we see that that email is now read. automatically for us, which is really nice. So now I don't have to I don't have to manually come into this inbox and select it once our analysis has run, right? I want this to kind of update itself, right? So let's go ahead and now, in one last step, let's go ahead and add a schedule to this guy. So I want this workflow to run, let's just say, for the purpose of this demo, I'll make it faster. Let's just say I want this to run every 10 seconds. So I'll go ahead and set that to 10. This example argument, I can just remove all that, and we'll say run workflow. So now once I start this, let me make sure that's back to unread. Let me delete my cases. And now let's go ahead and start this guy. So once 10 seconds has ran through, we should see a new workflow kick off. And now the schedule will run every 10 seconds. You can set it more realistically to like every 5, every 10, depending on kind of the frequency of, how of internal users sending you guys emails. But now we can see that this workflow has finished after the 10 seconds. And here we can see it's already kicking off another one. So this is running every 10 seconds. Go ahead and stop that. And then again, my email is now unread, which is really awesome. So I'm actually going to export this workflow and post it within the GitHub as well. And what you guys will be able to do is actually extract that, and you can import workflows, and you'll just upload the JSON file that will be in the GitHub. So you guys can actually have access to this workflow and kind of run some tests and build on it, make it a lot better. In the next video, we're going to handle attachments and how we can kind of kick that off to subflows if we have multiple attachments, and run analysis on attachments that we get from potential phishing emails. So I think that wraps it up for today's video. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next one.